Hello, Louis.
Thank you so much for coming out. The support and interest really means a lot. Feels very, very good in my heart that folks are here either because they know me. Yes, I've got to speak up. I'm going to stand up, so.
Oh boy. Thank you, Lou.
Yeah. No, good. All right, I'm going to sit down.
Talk a little louder, please.
Okay. Talking loud feels like I'm yelling to me. There are certain, like, families that talk loud and families that talk soft. And if you're from a soft-talking family, if you're invited or asked to talk loud, and I'm from a soft-talking family, it feels like I'm yelling. So anyway, I will yell, and then I hope you all, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, good. So there are so many ways of approaching talking about this particular book that it was rather a challenge to find, like, what do I really want to say? How do I want to say it? What sort of aspect of the book do I want to kind of focus on? So I decided I would focus on what is kind of a fundamental purpose of the book, of writing the book. And the purpose is this: it's to present a better way of managing two very, very fundamental needs that we have as human persons. Right? The first need is that we all need the embrace and acceptance and approval of our tribes, right? And the tribe could be one person in particular, it could be a family, it could be a peer group, it could be whatever. But that is a fundamental need, not a optional nice thing to have. We actually need it, right? The other need is to be true to who we are as individuals, true to what we really think, what we really feel, what we really understand, what we really know. Those two needs don't have to be in conflict with each other. In some ideal situation where you're accepted totally for the whole full person that you are, every feeling you have, every curiosity you have, every intuition you have, every experience you have, you would be allowed then to be your unique self. But that's not the state of society at this point. There's always a kind of conditional situation. In every family, there are certain things that are acceptable and certain things that are not. In every peer group, same deal. So we get caught in that kind of split that's created by our need to keep our bonds, intact. But also, sometimes it doesn't work so well in terms of if I'm going to have a feeling or a thought or a way of being that isn't acceptable in my tribe, right? So in the first half of my book, it's called My Ego and Myself, right? And it really sort of begins to spell out my notion of what an ego is, right? So I'm going to do a little reading from that part of the book. So here we go. The uniquely human problem the ego attempts to solve is that most often our safety in our tribes can be served only by acquiescing to the tribe's demands to suppress and repress certain vital expressions of our essential nature. Our dependency needs will be met only if we agree not to become unique self we were meant to be, or to become only a very selective version of that self. This demand to suppress our true selves is instinctively experienced as violent, hurtful, shaming, and frightening to the essential nature of young beings. Having to treat the felt truth of what we experience as if it was untrue or unworthy is exquisitely painful and enraging. The problem is that the expression of those feelings of hurt, fear, and shame, or any expression of angry protest against the demand to repress and suppress oneself, too often produces even more of a threat to our continued safety and protection within the tribe. Most often we are faced with a choice like the one faced by the wolf whose leg is caught in a trap. Either chew it off or die. And like the wolf, we make the decision to chew off vital pieces of ourselves in order to be safe and survive. The signs that let you know that the ego is at work are always the same. Whatever the ego has decided is good and acceptable for its host to be, to do, or to have, it will make sure that its host automatically, rigidly, and compulsively seeks to be, to do, or to have exactly that. And likewise, whatever the ego has decided is bad and unacceptable to be, to do, or to have, it will make sure that its host automatically, rigidly, and compulsively avoids exactly that. It is this automatic, rigid, and compulsory nature of the ego's operating system that is its hallmark. The ego doesn't believe in genuine free will or spontaneity. Those are too likely to cause the leakage of some unacceptable material that will only get you in trouble. So if the ego is doing its job well, what we will witness are folks who are totally locked into their good behaviors and their right beliefs and totally driven to acquire their notion of good stuff. The ego actually removes choice from the equation. This is why the multimillionaire can't stop making more money. The compulsive worker goes 24/7 without a break. The good person can't say no to any request for help. The battered person keeps trying to change their abuser. The compulsively suspicious person ends up isolated and alone. The student becomes suicidal over a B. The perfectionist is acutely embarrassed by any mistake. The know-it-all is ashamed of simple ignorance. Or the believer denigrates or destroys non-believers. The examples are endless. So this is really the problem with the ego. There's nothing inherently wrong with any of the human characteristics or capacities it chooses as its goods. Take, for example, caring about other people's comfort, a lovely, generous trait. But if you always have to keep other people comfortable, then you can never be helpful to people in ways that might require them to suffer some pain or discomfort. Likewise, giving one's self-expression a high value is built into our DNA. Self-expression is necessary both for surviving and for thriving. However, if I have to always self-express, regardless of the consequences to others, then I will inevitably become insensitive, reckless, or abusive. As noted before, the ego is the epitome of the old saw. To a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Our egos helped us navigate and survive the interpersonal minefields of our early years as developing persons. The problem for us hosts is that the ego is acting as if we and our life circumstances have not changed since childhood and adolescence. It therefore believes that we hosts should not change any aspect of its rigid operating system, and it will penalize us for trying. One of the biggest unacknowledged elephants in our common human living room is created by the culturally supported denial of our deep need for each other's acceptance, cooperation, approval, and goodwill. Not simple preference, but need. Without the collective presence of these qualities in ourselves and in those around us, we are at real risk of being diminished, damaged, or destroyed by each other. This need for and dependence on each other and the mutual vulnerability that it creates is a fact regardless of our denial. The elephant is in the living room even though socially and privately we may be all talking and walking around it as if it wasn't there. At a deep emotional and instinctual level, we are terrified of losing our membership, our status, or our value in the groups that matter to us most. Our continued existence feels endangered by such a loss. There's a quote by Martin Luther King that kind of captures the consequences of some of the solutions we make to this dilemma. He said, "Power without love becomes reckless and abusive. Love without power becomes anemic and sentimental." And by power, he was really talking about self-expression and self-development and self-agency. And by love, he was really talking about our need for each other and the need for connection. King's quote captures what happens when we are forced into suppressing either our dependency or our autonomy by our egos. By not openly talking about our dependency on each other, we are in effect pretending this reality does not exist. This denial disconnects us emotionally and spiritually from the possibility of experiencing each other's authentic and sensitively attuned embrace. It forces us away from openly seeking each other's cooperation, away from consciously and deliberately creating genuine mutual safety, satisfaction, and fulfillment. Likewise, this denial forces us into a distorted and limited form of autonomy that is dependent on efforts to control each other's cooperation and approval through threats, enticements, and/or accommodations. These efforts at best create temporary illusions of personal power, safety, and fulfillment, not the real thing. They certainly do not create authentic autonomy or trustworthy interpersonal safety, both of which can only arise when grounded in the conscious acceptance of the primary reality of our dependence on each other. The need to deny that primary reality forces us into the unfortunate extremes captured in King's quote. So our egos, which actually become a kind of our second nature and are on a kind of automatic mode of operating, force us out of contact with vital aspects of who we are. And they disconnect us from what I call our truth place. The second half of the book is really all about reconnecting with this amazing inner source. So I'm going to read a little bit about what is the truth place and how, maybe a little bit about how the ego tries to keep us out of there. So I'm using the word truth place for two reasons. For one, the word captures the essence of what it refers to, a place where we can go to gain fuller access to our true inner experience in a given moment. And the other reason is it's simply that it works well as a heading under which can be gathered for our exploration certain inner capacities for discovering deeper self-knowledge. These inner capacities empower us to skillfully fulfill both our deep need for acceptance and embrace of our tribes, as well as our deep need to be true to the development of our unique selves. Our truth place is not a thing, even though it does have a physical location within the trunk of our body, just as our rational mind is not a thing, but has a physical location within the head. We would say the source of our rational mind is located within our brain, and we would say the source of our truth place is located within our hearts and our guts. The numerous capacities of our rational mind are wonderful resources for certain ways of knowing and interacting with reality. Through analysis, logic, deduction, abstract thinking, mental problem solving, creative theorizing, and conceptual learning and memory, we have a set of powerful tools with which to understand reality and hopefully to bend it to the purpose of our collective safety and beneficial evolution. The numerous capacities of our truth place are wonderful resources for certain ways of knowing and interacting with reality. They are fundamentally different and complementary to the capacities of the rational mind. So in the truth place, which is really based down in our body, not in our heads, two of the ways of knowing are insight, knowing, and intuition. And I'm sure everybody has had that moment of an insight where you were confused about something or you had some kind of problem, you're trying to figure something out, and then you have that moment where it just goes, oh my God, I got it. I finally understand what this was all about, or I finally get what I need to do. There's clarity, there's no doubt, there's a clear sense of what you need to do next. It's a gift, right? It always feels like, wow. The ego may make you disbelieve it afterwards, but in the moment of having it, it's just a real powerful knowing. Intuitive knowing is a little fuzzier. It's, often just a feeling, well, something's wrong here, or I don't like what's going on, or I have a sense that I should make this action rather than that action. But it is, again, a felt kind of knowing. It's not an intellectual kind of knowing. These kinds of body-mind knowings, that's really kind of what they are. An insight is not just an intellectual knowing, and there's something almost physical about it in the sense of the clarity and definite knowing about it. But of course it involves the mind too. These kinds of body-mind knowings have a very different quality to them than the knowledge that is generated by thinking, deducing, analyzing, or remembering. Insights and intuitions are fresh, alive knowings that are felt to be revealing, meaningful, and accurate in the moment. They are more in the nature of discoveries rather than convictions, beliefs, deductions, memories, or speculations. They are not abstract. You know one in a physical way when you have one. Our egos may make us disregard it, forget it, or doubt it later, but you know it when you have it. You recognize your own knowing as true and accurate. And if you manage to stay connected to your truth place, then you will be guided by what is actually true for you from this moment to the next and the next and so on. It operates in this moment, whether responding to something happening right now or planning for and preparing to respond to some future experience. It knows it can't control outcomes, but it can participate, respond, influence, and open to the flow of experience in this moment and the next. The truth place doesn't swim against the flow of inner experience. It follows the current, knowing implicitly that the current knows how to direct itself. It is passionately interested in learning about, exploring, and dealing with all the domains of being alive, including the painful, threatening ones. The truth place wants you to know everything about you, without exception, inside and out. Every thought, every feeling, every sensation, every insight, every intuition, every opening and closing of your heart, every meaning, every confusion, every experience of being lost and then found again. It is inherently curious and attentive to all experiences. It is inherently curious about other people's experiences also. It is not interested in controlling or avoiding the flow of our life experiences or in judging or controlling others. It is very interested in learning skillful responses to all aspects of life that it comes in contact with or that come in contact with it, including hostile ones. And then just some other capacities that are also located in Truth Place. Insight and intuition are just two of the capacities for self-knowledge located within the Truth Place. There are several other valuable capacities in there that can be accessed by consciously placing our personal awareness in the physical neighborhood of the Truth Place. That is the trunk of your body, and keeping it there for a while. One of these capacities has come to be known under the heading of emotional intelligence. Our emotions and feelings are essential sources of information about our interpersonal environment. They let us know what means what in our relationships. They let us know when an interaction with another person feels safe or dangerous. They let us connect with another through empathy. They let us know the meaning of each of our relationships, the heartfelt meaning, A meaningful sense of purpose is also a felt experience, not just an abstract, dry idea in our minds. Love, joy, excitement, comfort, solace, peace, ease, contentment, satisfaction, gratitude, warmth, acceptance, and appreciation are all felt experiences emanating from within the Truthplace. And these feelings can keep deepening and expanding when given the regular and sustained attention of our personal awareness. There's also the experience that some people have had too of flow, or being in the zone, where you kind of drop into a place where there's a kind of ease and effortlessness to whatever you're doing that you just kind of fall into, and is a wonderful experience. There's a great quote by Bill Russell, who was the big basketball player back a few decades ago. He said, every so often a Celtic game would heat up so that it became more than a physical or even a mental game, and would be magical. The feeling is difficult to describe, and I certainly never talked about it when I was playing. Interesting. When it happened, I could feel my play rise to a new level, and at that special level, all sorts of odd things happened. It was almost as if we were playing in slow motion. During those spells, I could almost sense how the next play would develop and where the next shot would be taken. Even before the other team brought the ball in bounds, I could feel it so keenly that I'd want to shout to my teammates, "It's coming there," except that I knew everything would change if I did that. So it's such an interesting thing. So we live in an altered state of being that we accept as normal, and it is normal in the sense of most common. It has become our second nature. It is not our first nature. It is not natural. It is altered just in an acceptable and extremely common way. This alteration is maintained by our egos. The ego does not allow for flow. Of course, because it feels good and works so well when it happens, the ego will take credit for it after the fact and try to bottle the experience for its own controlling purposes. But while it is actually happening to the ego, it feels too much like being out of control. The ego must avoid any possibility of unplanned and uncontrolled surprises. So I think I'll leave it there. I think it gives you a sense of the sort of the thrust of the book is looking at what are the forces that contain us and constrict us and limit us and even cause us great suffering and pain. To be able to see that really clearly as not who you are, as learned, as acquired. We're not born with egos. The egos are something that develop over time, over thousands of interactions with parents and peer groups and society. But to really see the ego is real. It's a real thing, and as far as I'm concerned, it's not something that you can sort of pull out and have a physical object of, right? But you can get very tuned into how yours operates and what your ego thinks you must be and must not be. And once you begin to see it and see how automatic it is and how relentless it is, you can begin to step away from it. You can begin to not go with it. And so then where do you go if you're not going to go with your ego, if you can drop down into the resources in our body knowing, insight, intuition, creativity, emotional intelligence. It's a much, much better source of guidance and really leads to a kind of sense of self that feels safe, feels strong, feels true, feels authentic, feels good, feels really good. So in my own evolution, I'm so grateful to having discovered what I have discovered and done the work I've done on myself that I've done. I have that place. I have access to that place in me. It's not that the other isn't there also, the ego. So there's kind of a dual existence going on. But I can see when I'm caught by my ego much more clearly and much more quickly. And it doesn't seem to grab me quite as long as it used to in the past, and I can drop into the truth place. just as a kind of little story about how the ego doesn't want to be revealed, it doesn't want to be seen, it doesn't want to be talked about, it doesn't want to be challenged. I prepared this talk. I stuck the paper in my book. I put the book on the counter of in our kitchen in plain sight. Fran and I get ready to go. Put all the other stuff in the car. I'm out of the driveway somewhere down the road, and oh my God, I forgot my talk in the book. I forgot my talk in my book. That was my ego not wanting me to do this tonight, not wanting me to reveal whatever it means about my, revealing myself, but also revealing the nature of the ego. So it may sound a little schizophrenic or multiple personality, but I'm telling you, in my experience, this is a real inner force. And if you can cut loose of it and get to this other place, which is, where we all want to live from, that sense of authenticity and realness. But it's risky, it's not in our society, that's not an acceptable, really safe place to go to all the time. So you have to there's a kind of work to it and a practice to it. But anyway, I thank you for listening. Would love to get some questions and dialogue going. So, yes.
Does the ego have any benefit for us? And if so, what?
Yeah. It has a benefit as a child.
Of what?
It has a benefit when you're a child because you really needed to do what you needed to do to keep your connections with your parents and stay safe, right? It can propel people into huge success. So, like the multimillionaire who keeps wanting to make money, it can, whatever it says is good, you're going to do that compulsively, and that can be a good thing. A lot of good things have happened as a result of somebody's ego saying, they've got to do this, they've got to save the world, let's say. But we also know that a lot of huge evil things have been done because some egos, like Hitler's, said, we need to wipe out a whole body of people because I think they're bad. But it does have a useful purpose. It's just the rigidity and the automaticness and the compulsiveness of it locks us in, so we don't have options. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Jeff?
Are some egos better than others?
Yours, I'm sure.
I'm serious.
No, I get it.
I mean, if there were a rating system like the Richter scale,
Right.
that's a 7 or that's a 4 or.
So let's.
I'm not joking.
We'll go to a current issue, right, with men in particular. So there is a possibility of kind of dividing men, if you'll excuse my French, into dickheads and good guys.
That's not French.
No. Dickheads are power-oriented. Their egos are saying they have to be in control, they have to dominate, they have to, whatever the other person is feeling doesn't matter. They have to go after what they need to go after. Compulsive. Good guys, in that sense, if their ego is saying you have to consider other people, you have to be a nice guy, you have to, put other people's needs before yours, etc., that's a less destructive ego than the dickhead ego, right? But for the good guy, if he can't every now and then, if it's now not allowed to be aggressive, to be assertive, to have my needs have some primacy, right? Then I'm stuck into a kind of subservient or self-destructive, because I'm really not taking care of myself.
I guess what I'm looking for, is it better to be, is it worse to be a dickhead? I mean,
It does more damage.
is that ego compulsion.
Does more damage.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think of a Hitler ego, obviously, But it's easy to kind of get to the bad egos, the grandiose egos, and be focused on them as the ego. That's the ego problem, that kind of ego, and not realize that even if people are, compulsively trying to be good, if they can't open to other ways of looking at things that don't fit that demand, they're missing opportunities and missing options. Any other? Yes.
Who's the ego that's going to judge who's the dickhead in?
Well, hopefully that's not an ego. Hopefully that's, there is a real native self, right? There is somebody in here who is not the ego, who can see and who can register, where is this coming from in this other person. So, hopefully it wouldn't be just another ego judging another ego. That's not going to get us anywhere. Yeah? Yes.
In your research, what are some of the techniques that you found work in helping people get to the truth place?
Well, it's a kind of, what I put in the book is it's a form of self-inquiry that's meditative self-inquiry. So you start by dropping into a quiet space like you would if you were meditating, maybe focusing on your breath and letting thoughts go and letting feelings go and getting grounded and kind of maybe even dropping down, bringing your awareness down into your body. Like if I asked you to move your awareness down into your right foot right now and feel your right foot, you could feel your shoe and the warmth and the pressure, which you were not aware of before until you moved your awareness there, right? So the technique in the book is to move your awareness down into your chest and your belly. That's where it's a little different from the transcendental type of meditating where you're letting everything go, 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 go. You're going to drop down and hang out in your heart and your gut, really, and listen and let it emerge, whatever is there. Allow it to arise. So like I said earlier, it's more of a discovery process and a kind of uncovering rather than, figuring out and analyzing. But it takes some practice. That's the way, because insights and intuitions come and go willy-nilly, and we're thankful when they come. But if you practice this kind of self-inquiry, you can deliberately go to the place where insights happen. You don't have to wait for it just to kind of happen by chance. That's some of the power. So it's a simple technique, but because of the ego not wanting us to go there, it's not an easy necessarily thing. That's why it takes practice over time. Gretchen.
Yeah, you sort of portraying the ego as a villain, and I'm used to, what I've learned about psychology, to think of it as, in terms of ego strength,
Yes.
and the many things that our ego lets us do, like make judgments and
Yes.
understand the world and solve
Right.
problems.
Be discriminating.
Yes,
Yeah, right,
yes.
right.
And I'm wondering how you view those things and whether you see them as part of the ego or part
No,
of the truth
I
place,
mean,
or how
that
is it?
version of ego is totally different from my version of
Okay.
ego. That version of ego is really more what I would call the native self,
Okay.
right? My ego in the psychoanalytic world is more like Freud's superego and ego ideal,
Yes, that's what it sounds like.
right? For those of you who are psychoanalytically inclined. Yes.
In the yogic Indian, it's the small self and the large self.
Yes.
It's a little less than the big S.
Right.
The one's more genuine.
Yeah, I mean, it gets kind of complicated because, like the version that Gretchen was saying about that ego, which is kind of our native humanness, human beingness, our our intellect, all the stuff, our emotions, our intuition, all those capacities in the psychoanalytic world of ego, those are ego capacities. So they're good to have. But that's a small self. That's not the higher self. My ego is another additional disrupting entity that screws with your native self and screws with your higher self.
A villain.
A dickhead.
Well, it is ultimately a villain. It doesn't start out that way. It really thinks it's trying to save us in the sense of we don't want to appear unacceptable to our tribe. It's trying to keep us safe with our tribe. And that's a really powerful need and function. I mean, when it comes down to making a choice in your life and my life, where you're going to go against what somebody who is really meaningful to you, or a group who's really meaningful to you, holds as truth, or the best way to be, or the right kind of thinking, and now you're going to step out of that and make that choice, it can be terrifying. Because it's almost like a survival need that we need that embrace. So it takes a lot of courage to be true to ourselves at times, and risk ostracism, and risk judgment, and risk being called crazy or sinful or whatever it may be. My sense is that our culture, unfortunately, really has taught us that need for acceptance and embrace is a weakness, right? And it's something to get over. And like that saying, sticks and stones will break your bones, but names will never hurt you. It's utter BS. Utter BS. Names hurt. We need the approval of those who matter to us. So if a peer group turns on somebody and starts calling them names, that's going to be devastating. And that's not a weakness. That's a human vulnerability. But it's tricky because if I recognize that need and that vulnerability, where does my unique self and my independence and my own autonomy fit in relationship to meeting that need? It's an ongoing human issue. But I think if we deny one or the other, and in this country we deny the dependency needs, we're into being rugged individuals and thinking our own minds and all the rest of that. It's phony, it's false, it's empty, and it leads to a lot of trouble.
And really the human need, part of the human need is to risk.
It's to
risk,
what?
To take risks.
Yeah.
To grow.
Yes. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, you look at kids, they're into like learning and doing stuff and taking things apart and being curious and falling down and getting up, and it's like that. You're right, but that the culture really can put the brakes on that.
It does take courage.
Yeah, there's a great story by an English guy who's big into creativity. He was really talking about how creativity gets squashed, right? But he's describing this incident in a school, young kids, in a drawing class, and this one little girl is drawing. The teacher comes over and says, "What are you drawing?" And she says, "I'm drawing God." And the teacher says, "Nobody knows what God looks like." Thank God the child had some gumption. The kid says, "They will in a minute." But that kind of comment from a teacher, So it's not even necessarily like evil people, but we are in a systemic denial of we need acceptance, we need approval, we need the nourishment that gives to ourselves to be allowed to come forth and be whole.
So in addition to practice, going to the Truthplace,
Right.
how does a person learn to trust that there is a place inside with that truth?
Well, I think I'll tell you the way I've learned, right, is mostly by finding myself suffering for not, right? And really feeling bad and lost and blah, blah, blah. So kind of being pushed by pain and personal unhappiness into like, well, what's really going on? What can I really figure out, or can I really feel into what I need to do in a given moment, right? For me, because of my family history, being aggressive, being assertive, saying no, setting limits was like off limits, right? So part of my learning process was realizing I had to learn how to say no to people who I was really afraid would be angry. I had to suffer through intense doubt, fear, sometimes not doing it, and then feeling like I self-betrayed again. But the pain of not being true to what feels true kept pushing me forward. So I don't know if it's trust. It's kind of almost like, I think once you make the turn, once you realize the way I'm doing it isn't working, it's really causing me a lot of grief and trouble. I need to find a different way. And somebody begins to give you the notion that, well, maybe you need to listen to your heart and your gut. You're going to have to do it under really intense negative stuff happening, right? But the other alternative ends up being so miserable that you kind of keep at it. Once you get a little ground under your feet, though, and you feel the benefits of doing this, man, you do not want to lose that. You will. You get it and you lose it, but it feels so good to be true, to be authentic, to really, and not in some ego, tripping, I don't give a shit what you think about it, I'm going to be who I am kind of way. But it's a deeper place. And my sense is if we don't do this kind of work as humans, we're going to be having the government that we have, we're going to be having the society we have, we're going to be having the wars that we have, we're going to be. So I'm pretty passionate about the need to really find out how can I be in my inner life, inside life, in a much more conscious, much more intimate, much more curious, much more open way, or I'm going to be run by all the conditioning and stuff that I learned as a kid, and think I'm just being me when I'm really being run by my ego.
What if your inner true place tells you to do things that other people don't like? I mean, it seems to me it sort of brings you right back to the beginning conflict that you're talking about.
Yeah. What if it does?
Well, you just got through saying that we really have a hard time dealing with other people's disapproval.
Yeah, we do. So, I mean, in the given moment, if you're having a moment like that, it's a very personal thing, very personal moment. Am I going to do the thing that other people don't like about me or not? You make a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And it will, if you choose to do it, it will be scary, it will be painful, you might even feel like you're being bad, right?
And you may lose the approval of your tribe.
Sorry?
You may lose the approval of
That's the
your tribe.
risk. That's the risk.
Yeah, but on the flip side, if you're successful, you're doing whatever it is you believe in, you're setting a good example for those of the tribe that's in front of you. And that's really how to change people, I think. It's a good way. Like there's a sutra in the Yoga Sutras, and it says that when you are conflicted with something in front of you that doesn't feel right, that it's a negative force and it's not right.
Right.
Look inside yourself and see what's in me that's mirroring this problem. What can I do to boost this person out of this place
Right.
by my good actions?
Right.
And that's really what everyone has, I think, would go a long way if we start looking at it that way.
It's such a good idea,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this is one of the things that has always fascinated me. There's so many good ideas around of how we should be or could be. How come we're not that way?
Because ourselves to make those decisions.
And
That's
maybe we've got
That's
some,
what you
maybe
said.
we've got some kind of thing going on inside of
Yeah.
us
That
that
we-
is really interfering with that happening.
Right.
I mean, you know, there's so many good ideas in psychology and spirituality and self-help. We're not short on good ideas. We're not short on how to, you know, what's the best way to be. But I just have this sense that, you know, we're, again, sort of in this society, it's like, just think the right thoughts and just take the...
No, but it comes to that self-contemplation and sitting with yourself, I guess.
Well, it comes to, I think, a kind of compassion that at times I'm really confused and I'm really lost and I'm really scared. And I don't want to do the right thing because it feels so scary. If I can be compassionate to that part of me, instead of muscling, just muscling, right? Compassionate first, right? And then taking the scary action. Not just, oh, I shouldn't feel that way, I should do this. The should stuff, it doesn't seem to work so well.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Elizabeth?
I wanted to make a comment to begin with. I think it's really brave of you, you know, to attempt to language what is really like experience, you know, what's phenomenology. And there are different words that have been given to this phenomenon. I think you're like, you're putting it out there in your own unique way. And yes, it seems similar to this and similar to that,
Right.
you know, and yet there's something about the synergy of the way that you're doing it that I think is really a contribution. And this stuff is so hard to talk about, you know, and to write about.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to acknowledge you for that and also say that there's a sense of it coming from deeply lived experience. So it's not just coming from your head,
Right.
you know.
Right.
So the combination of the two are really powerful and it takes a lot of courage. And I personally feel touched and inspired by that.
Thank you. Thank
So
you.
I wanted to say that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It did take courage.
Yeah.
You know, writing, like the, you know, the story of leaving the book and the talk behind, right? When I would sit down to write, often what would come up was this incredible doubt and shame, really. Like I had nothing worthwhile to say. That would be what would be the feeling in front of sitting down and writing. If I listened to that and just allowed that to stop me, and sometimes it did, it would never have happened. But there was something about taking this, like I do this work with my clients, right? To take it out of the office where people have come to me and are asking me to tell them what I know and get my help, to like actually trying to language it and put it in a book and put it out there into the unknown was a completely different challenge for me. And I was terrified today, you know, of doing this and speaking this, because some of it is uncomfortable. Some of it people don't want to hear. But I said to myself, look, this is what I know. I know it's helped me. I know it's helped a lot of people. I think it really is stuff we have to face. And the discomfort is understandable. I don't judge it. It's just how it is.
So, just one other comment, if you don't mind, too. I mean, in terms of psychoanalysis, you know, someone who came to mind that I'm fond of is Winnicott. You know, he used the term false self and true self.
Right.
You know, and interestingly enough, you know, he was within the tribe of Freudian psychoanalysis and was really trying to kind of And so he was writing about false self, true self, which rang true to me when I read it years
Right.
ago.
Right.
To me, what you're doing, among many, many other things, is you're taking those constructs, so to speak, and you're making them experiential.
Right.
And
That's my big deal.
it's a
Right.
big
I
difference.
don't want a strictly theoretical book.
Yeah.
It's why I wrote, I know some of you may not know this, but the book also includes a fictional workshop in which there are about 7 or 8 participants, all sort of composites of clients and people I've known. After each piece of writing I do, the workshop participants have looked at that writing, and then we're in a dialogue with each other about, does it make sense to them, doesn't it, what's their reaction to it. And I did that because I wanted to, it's like, I often say to somebody, like, you can look at a map of Alaska and really study the detail and have all the mountains and you don't know Alaska until you go there and experience it directly, right? So the map is useful, but if you don't get down into the territory, it's a waste of time, right? So the dialogues were really kind of a way of trying to get it down into lived experience, including experience that some people in the workshop were pissed off at me for what I was putting out there, which is okay. It's like,
What you were saying before, breaking with the tribe.
yeah.
Breaking with the tribe and putting your stuff out there.
Yeah,
It just makes me think of Dr. James Gordon's work at the Center for Mind Body Medicine. And I don't know if you know Donald Fleck in Manhattan, who does
I don't think I do.
group work on this. And it makes me think of Richard Rohr.
Yes, I know
the,
that. Yeah, I know
Franciscan.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful to
I like
see
him.
that there are so many people doing this. And I just want to echo what Elizabeth said, to put it down.
Right.
And then to be able to articulate it is really a skill.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah,
But
there's really.
I also want to say, I'm sorry, yes, there are a lot of people who are doing this. And there's something unique about the synergy of what he's putting together and expressing. I feel the need to say that, really. There's something unique about the synergy of what you're putting together and expressing. And yes, there are people doing parts work, there are people doing all these different things.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah, I think one thing I hope comes out of this is that people have more compassion for the obstruction that the ego creates, right? That our egos are not our fault, right? You really don't pick the ego you end up with. It is out of, this interaction stuff, right? But we do have to be responsible for it. It's like it's not really a company, but I call it a company, Ego Mechanics Incorporated, right? And the logo for Ego Mechanics says, do you have an ego, or does your ego have you? And that's really the rub, right? Because we all have an ego, right? It's not a crime to have an ego.
I was reading the record last week when I saw the announcement for this, and something I resonated with whatever it was in the paper. So P.S. I bought the book with the intention of reading it or making a big dent before tonight, but I didn't. But based off of what you read, I find that you're tapping into what I would consider unrelated or supposedly unrelated universal truths that speak the same thing but in maybe different languages. What comes to my mind is the allegory of Plato's cave, Plato's cave,
No, that's
where people are enslaved, chained in darkness, and they're looking at what they perceive to be reality, when in fact it's a shadow. And then as they're enlightened, looking at the light, they're rejecting it, they're arguing with it, they're fighting against it, but as they become more and more enlightened, they become more in tune with who they are. So I thank you for that, because I'm wanting to validate it from several different sources, that really it's just another viewpoint of the same thing.
Yeah, no, there's, in a sense, there's nothing new in this book. It is a way of looking at it, right? And if there's something that I've added, it's a very detailed description of how the ego actually works inside us, how it does its job. Because I have not seen that described somewhere before. And once you get how it actually works, then you can see it and step away much more readily. Right? But the Truthplace is like, everybody's been trying to get there forever. Right? So that's some wonderful writings by people around self-inquiry as a process. It's just really beautiful, powerful stuff, but not enough about the interferences. So I'm really trying to make this whole process more compassionate and more potent at the same time. But you know, if it was so easy, if it was so accessible, these good ideas were so, if it was just a matter of thinking good ideas, we'd all be enlightened. It'd be a different planet. Something is holding us back. And most of the time we blame ourselves. But I think a lot of what holds us back is beyond our control, until we get to see how it actually operates inside us.
I have a question that speaks to that, actually. I understand that the ego forms to protect us in our family and to make us fit in our family, and so we do what our family wants us to do. And if we don't, the ego frightens us or makes us doubt or terrorizes us. And those are the lieutenants, the ego's lieutenants.
Right.
But my question really is, if the ego is so clever and so smart as to do that, why the hell does it hang around later and continue to do that?
Right. I mean, it's frozen in time. It isn't really a learning entity.
It's
Is it
not a learning
crystallized?
entity.
Is it crystallized?
Yeah, it's like really, it's formed, that's its belief system, it's locked, right? So there's no, egos don't self-reflect, they don't learn, they're not interested. They think this is the way you have to be safe.
So it shuts down at a certain point.
It becomes automatic.
Or automatic,
Right?
yeah.
And closed.
Right.
Closed system.
Right.
It'll shapeshift, but always with the same objective, to keep you acceptable. So like, you and I left the Catholic Church and became hippies. But now we had to be really, really good hippies.
Right. Very true.
Right. So that's the deal with the ego. You can leave a tribe, enter another tribe, but you carry with you, I have to be this way now because I'm now in this tribe, and this tribe matters to me, so I got to be acceptable to this tribe and hide what may not be acceptable. It's very clever. Yes?
What advice do you have for someone who is surrounded by people who are unconsciously always automatically on their ego? Because I totally am around a group of people that are always controlled by the ego. I mean, that's what I get the vibe from.
I think that's normal society.
That's why they have caves in India.
Right. I mean, we are, sort of currently mostly captured and unconscious that it's ego that's at work, except if it's your ego and I see your ego. So I always say you got to find fellow travelers, and when you find them, keep them, right? And hang out as much as you can with folks like that, and keep getting validated that you're on the right path and supported that way. But, you know, we've got a long, long way to go as a species.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
So in your construct of the ego, what is the time where it closes up, closes down, and stops learning? Because you're saying, I believe, that it's learning from your family experience,
Right.
and then you're saying it's closed, it's a closed system. When does it close?
Certainly by the time you're 13.
Mitzvah.
But I would say probably by the age of 7. It's basically set. You know, things can happen that can alter that. Life circumstances change because kids are much more pliable than we are. But you know, the family system and the peer group system usually stay pretty consistent. So by 7, 8, certainly by 13, it's pretty much in place. So any other questions? Or we kind of reached a saturation point? Feels that way.
Well, one question I think you should say or speak about, it's not a question really, but how can you tell what's happening within you when the ego is actually in charge?
Well, you're going to be acting compulsively, rigidly, and automatically. So,
But if you don't get that right away, that's a little subtle. What are the other ways the ego can control you and work you around?
well, to be able to know, am I in the grip of my ego? That's kind of what you're asking, right? If you look in your body's going to be gripped, right? Like for me, it's my chest, right? I feel this kind of clench whenever my ego is operating. I'm not open, I'm not free, I'm not relaxed, certainly not in any kind of flow. And that's a fairly regular state. But that is a sign that you're in the grip. Literally, your body tells you. You know, when you have an insight, your chest opens, you breathe, you know, there's space there. When you have a clarity or a breakthrough or a real connection with another person, you can feel it in your chest. It opens, it feels rich, it feels warm, it feels really good. But if I'm tight and clenched, then, you know, the survival system, the ego is at work making that happen.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, I think probably a pretty good sign is if you're doing something that you know you don't want to do.
Yes.
Which happens
Yes.
A lot.
Right.
Or you're criticizing yourself, or you're terrified, or
Right.
one or another of those
Yeah,
things.
if you're shredding yourself.
You're shredding yourself.
That's the ego at work. Also, if you're pumping yourself up and inflating yourself, that's the ego at work.
Lots of tools.
So again, thank you so much for your interest and openness.
Thank you.
Thank you.